All right, big smile on everybody. All right, thank you very much, Lawrence. I'd like to invite Mr. Paul Carttar, Senior Partner of the Bridgespan Group and the former Director of the U.S. Social Innovation Fund, to deliver our second keynote address and share his U.S. perspective. Please.
Okay. Thank you all. It's truly a pleasure to be with you today, especially to be in the presence of such a distinguished group of pioneers and would-be pioneers. Given that Doug did not trip, I want to give you another laugh opportunity by sharing one of my favorite cartoons that I think is actually quite relevant to today's event. And so you'll see here a gathering of dinosaurs. Now, not to be confused with all of you, okay? And at the podium is a particularly authoritative dinosaur, not to be confused with me. And what this dinosaur says is, "The picture's pretty bleak, gentlemen. The world's climates are changing, the mammals are taking over, and we all have a brain about the size of a walnut." Now, I think all of us can empathize to a pretty profound degree with the situation that these dinosaurs are confronting, and it kind of coincidentally or ironically, I mean, we're facing some of the same problems. We're facing changing climate. We're certainly facing a host of challenges that relate to the growing mammalian population on Earth. But there is a very fundamental difference between ourselves and the dinosaurs, and that is that we actually have pretty considerable brains. And put very simply, our challenge is to utilize that brain power to the greatest extent possible to have a positive impact on our world. And fortunately, we bring to this challenge some pretty significant assets, among them being the skills and resources represented in this room, but also the fact that we have at our disposal an approach to social impact that has actually been demonstrated to align with our skills and resources and capabilities to drive significant social impact, and that, of course, is venture philanthropy. So I want to highlight 3 points today that actually are quite compatible with what Doug and Lawrence have emphasized, and the first being that venture philanthropy is a unique, powerful vehicle for developing high-impact solutions. Second, that realizing the full potential of venture philanthropy will require active collaboration with a lot of entities, but especially government, and that over the next 10 years, we're going to see a period of very dynamic change, which has particularly strong possibilities for us here in Asia. Now, there are many different ways to drive social impact, but venture philanthropy stands out as being truly unique in several respects. It is private and entrepreneurial. It is, even though we want to collaborate with government, it is not government-centric. It's private and entrepreneurial. And the essential element in venture philanthropy is simply individual citizens who have a passion for improving the world. And I want to emphasize here that venture philanthropy is at its essence a truly meritocratic approach to driving social change. It is not about what your title is. It is not about what school you went to or what kind of personality you have. Venture philanthropy is very much about your ability to target a critical need and then to contribute positively in a process of bringing resources to bear to develop and grow powerful solutions to these problems. And in that process, to do it by deploying private capital, strategic and operational expertise, a commitment to management accountability, and then also, collaborating with governments and other parties that can be very effective here. Now, in our typical modern conceit, we tend to think of venture philanthropy as being a new phenomenon, but nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, if you look back over time, certainly I'll use U.S. examples, but I'm sure it's true in many other places, that you see many examples where the entrepreneurial spirit of individuals combined with capital and other expertise have actually led to the creation of solutions that had profound impact on the development of our societies. And I want to highlight three here, again, drawn from the U.S. The efforts of Clara Barton in the 19th century to found and build the American Red Cross, which is by far the largest relief-providing entity in the United States. To your right, Jane Addams, who founded the settlement house movement in the United States, which provided services to literally millions of immigrants from all over the world who are coming to the United States and facilitated their effective integration in communities. And perhaps most iconic, the efforts of Andrew Carnegie, the steel magnate, to actually build a system of public libraries in the United States through personal contributions that led to the construction of literally thousands of libraries across the U.S. What is new is the development of venture philanthropy as a very specific investment approach that has a name and it has rules, all of which are intended to create greater facility with this approach and ultimately to greater impact. And looking back over the last 20 years, I would submit that this evolution has really gone through three different phases. The first we can call development, is basically the 1990s and early 2000s, which involved the creation of the initial VPOs, as Doug was describing them, so New Profit, where Kim is from, and the Etta McConnell Clark Foundation, others, and the initial investments that these organizations made. Then we moved to sort of a validation phase, and primarily I'm talking about the experience in the United States and Europe, although you can probably see the same pattern here. In the validation phase, mainly during the 2000s, we see the expansion of the investor base, refinement of the models, and actually the validation and proof of a handful of these models, which were actually demonstrated through effective evaluation to be effective in driving impact. We are now entering the third stage, where our challenge is to take these successful models and actually guide them through this process of becoming, as Doug would say, moving from these just isolated examples of something successful to something that can have true, effective, systemic impact in our societies. And I want to give you a couple of examples. So if there are any skeptics out there, a couple of examples of organizations, again, these are drawn from the U.S., that have grown up through a venture philanthropy process, but are poised for profound impact. And the first on the left is an organization called Youth Villages. It aims to help children from troubled homes lead stable lives. Now, like any good entrepreneurial, innovative model, it is driven by a very specific insight. And the insights in this instance are that children, troubled children, are best served not in an institution or in someone else's house. They're best served in their own house. And another insight is that with the appropriate counseling, troubled families can actually change their behavior in ways that create a much more effective environment for raising kids. Youth Villages model has gone through multiple randomized controlled trials, and it's been demonstrated to deliver twice the impact of traditional solutions. Interestingly enough, at 1/3 the cost. Despite that, and it's a state-driven innovation, it's only the dominant provider in 11 of the 50 states, so it's a very significant opportunity to grow. Then we have Nurse-Family Partnership. It, in contrast, aims to break the cycle of intergenerational poverty for first-time low-income mothers, and its insight is that appropriately timed visits in the home with first-time mothers can actually improve not only prenatal care, but effective parenting. It, too, has been through multiple randomized controlled trials that have demonstrated its superiority in driving impact and also its ability to save significant costs. Similarly here, despite all that, it serves 23,000 mothers out of the millions that are out there potentially. So clearly we've got a ways to go in terms of realizing the potential for venture philanthropy, and it's going to require collaboration. And in this instance, I think, especially with government. Now, why government? for several reasons, the most obvious of which is simply one of financial resources. And this, again, is illustrated from the U.S., just to give you kind of orders of magnitude, that the amount of spending for social services in the U.S. across government is literally 4 times the total amount of all private giving in the U.S., which is one of the societies with the best entrenched private giving habits. But it doesn't have to be this way. Let me, before I move on to this, I mean, there are a couple of other reasons, of course, why government is a particularly appropriate partner. One of the most significant being that every society makes judgments about what the appropriate role of government is, and in most societies, this leads to a situation where we determine that certain sectors of the service-providing public are literally under the jurisdiction of government, and we see the creation of large public systems. Well, if your intervention pertains to these public systems, say education or health, then obviously at some point as you face the challenge of scaling, you're going to have to deal with the government. The third thing I want to highlight is it just goes to the ability of government for all sorts of reasons to be an active facilitator of processes, whether it's creating an ecosystem or a legal environment or whatever that facilitate the development of effective venture philanthropy types of partnerships. Now, all of us in the U.S., and we take, especially as we go internationally, we can be oftentimes very self-conscious about different things that the U.S. is doing that cause all sorts of controversy. But I'm pleased to say that in this instance, I can offer a very good example of a government and a private partnership and collaboration around venture philanthropy by giving you the example of the Social Innovation Fund. And I want to start with an observation made by President Obama, and this was actually, he said this at an event that was introducing the Social Innovation Fund. I'm going to read it. I know you can read it, but this is a truly remarkable statement. The bottom line is clear. Solutions to America's challenges are being developed every day at the grassroots, and government shouldn't be supplanting those efforts. It should be supporting those efforts. Instead of wasting taxpayer money on programs that are obsolete or ineffective, government should be seeking out creative, results-oriented programs and helping them replicate their efforts across America. And the Social Innovation Fund, which I had the privilege of directing in its first 3 years, was created specifically to do this, to leverage the unique powers of government in collaboration with the private sector to stimulate the growth of outstanding social purpose organizations that do work in low-income communities, and to do this through 3 different ways. One is providing growth capital, ultimately to selected high-impact nonprofits. Also, though, influencing federal policy and the behavior of other government agencies, and finally sharing experience and learning more broadly through the nonprofit sector so that it facilitated improved investments among all sorts of other parties. Now, this program, which was quite innovative in its own right, absolutely is grounded on some of the key principles of venture philanthropy, starting with the use of experienced intermediaries. So the Social Innovation Fund's grantees include some of the most significant venture philanthropy organizations that we know of, including New Profit. Second would be the fact that the model is explicitly oriented toward both public and private funding. In fact, there are very strict matching requirements, the end result of which is that in the Social Innovation Fund, for every dollar of public money, it leads to the contribution of $2.50 of private money, all oriented toward the growth of evidence-backed interventions. And finally, then there are other features of this that are grounded in the experience of venture philanthropy, including the selection processes, rigorous evaluation, and of course, the sharing of knowledge. Now, the jury is still out on the Social Innovation Fund and how it's going to operate, but I want to share with you some statistics here. We've awarded $137 million in federal funds to 20 intermediaries, raised $350 million in match commitments, selected over 200 social purpose organizations with evidence, and provided services to more than 200,000 incremental individuals, and we're just getting going. So the final thing I want to mention is just looking forward at the next 10 years. And there are several reasons for all of us to be very optimistic. And first of all is the persistent public budget constraints that virtually every organization, every government faces. Now, that may sound like bad news, not good news, but our bet is that these budget constraints are actually going to lead to governments being much more selective about what they spend their money on, and it will raise the importance of evidence in these selection processes. We're seeing, in Singapore is an excellent example of this, of course, the increasing private wealth. We're seeing a growing inventory of proven solutions. We're seeing movement toward improved government collaboration and the development of some very innovative financing mechanisms. Now, in that context, as both Doug and Lawrence have suggested also, there's a lot of reasons to believe that the situation in Asia is particularly favorable. And I want to highlight some of these are potentially quite obvious, but we're very optimistic about Asia. You know, we see the social challenges that are demanding innovative solutions, growing private wealth again, increasing government interest in private sector initiatives, as the event that Lawrence hosted yesterday illustrates, and not to be forgotten, a rich experience base of U.S. and Europe trials and failures, and not to be forgotten, big brains. So you look at this room, and some might even say here in Asia we have the biggest brains. But however you think about that, the mere fact that you have big brains does not mean that you can't benefit from a little advice. And so as the reigning kind of, authoritative dinosaur, I'm going to offer just a couple of things for your consideration. The first, and possibly the most important, is to aim high. You represent a very scarce resource. And the most important decisions that you or your organizations can make is where you actually focus. What do you support? It is imperative that you aim to find models that actually have realistic potential of transformative large-scale impact and focus your efforts there. The second, echoing again some things that both Doug and Lawrence have, is managing the risk of failure. There's only one way to eliminate failure, and that is to do nothing, and that's not an alternative. Trust your judgment. You all have good judgment. You've demonstrated it before, but do so backed by evidence. It is crucial that we increase the role that evidence plays in making investment decisions in the nonprofit sector. Proactively build mutually beneficial partnerships, even if that means going into concert with the government. And finally, aggressively leverage the knowledge and resources that you have at your disposal that are represented by the Asian Venture Philanthropy Network. And in closing, I want to leave you with a thought. Now, if this challenge that you're all confronting seems daunting, there's a good reason for that. And that's because it is. The problems are very significant, they're complex, many of them are deeply entrenched, and we are few with resources scarce. But I'd like to leave you with the wise words of a very renowned American anthropologist named Margaret Mead, who at one point said the following: "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." Thank you very much. Thanks.